Okay, we can take a deep breath now. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lucy Gray, and I am the co-founder of Global Actionable Innovations. And today we have Courtney Welsh with us, who's going to be sharing some information about Global Nomads Group, the group that she is the CEO of. We are a professional learning community that's inclusive for school leaders and anyone else interested in educational innovation. We write on Medium, we meet weekly to discuss educational innovations, and we also are going to be hosting some professional learning events and other things coming up in the future. So if you're interested in joining us and following our progress, I will give you information at the end of this program. So I'm going to turn this. One thing that we always do, and usually Don Buckley is here to do, and I have to pull up my questions, is we offer our guests a few questions as kind of a warm up. And these are from Don Buckley, my co-partner, my co-founder in this, started these as part of, inspired by Vanity Fair magazine, which at the end of the magazine has a questionnaire every month with a different celebrity. So we have various education celebrities here with us. So we do a similar questionnaire, and it's called a Proust questionnaire after Marcel Proust, apparently, which I was saying Proust for about 10 years. So it's good to know that that's Proust. So Courtney, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. How are you this morning?
I'm well, got the kids off to school, and so now I'm settled in for a good conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I just had to, we had a fire in my house and a flood in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I just had two guys measuring around me and talking in very rapid Polish. And I'm like, I've got a meeting, guys, because this is my dedicated workspace. So it's been a busy Monday morning already, even though it's early. So I'm going to ask you one question. I'm going to ask you a couple questions just to get us warmed up today. So what is your idea of perfect happiness, Courtney?
Gosh, that's a hefty question for a Monday morning. I think perfect happiness for me revolves a lot around my family. So it doesn't need to be all of us necessarily together, but that everyone is engaged in the thing that makes them happy in that moment, which changes constantly. But I think I'm perfectly happy when I feel like those around me are settled, and then I can focus on some of the things that make me happy.
I think especially in light of the pandemic, I think with family, and I think that's really come into play for a lot of people, for sure. And I feel the same way too as a mother, wanting to make sure everybody is on the right path and doing what they want to do and have figured it out. So I agree with you on that. I think my idea of perfect happiness is personally, from a selfish perspective, is sitting in front of the Grand Tetons in Jackson Hole and watching. I could watch those mountains for days, I think. And we spent a lot of time out there as a family, and I went to camp there as a kid. My kids went to camp there as a kid. So I think those mountains kind of symbolize for me nature, adventure, things that are powerful, more powerful than I. And it just gives me it kind of balances me, I guess. So we haven't been out there for a few years. So I'm feeling like that pull to go out there and get that fix so that I feel balanced. Okay. Some of these questions, I'm not going to ask you which living person you most despise. That's not a good educator conference, but our question. But which word or words do you overuse in general? Don said that the word amplify was one that he overuses in conversation quite a bit. I use the word awesome quite a bit. Is there any phrase that you overuse?
I'm about to just completely out myself because I'm going to say a word that I'm going to use several times in the conversation we're about to have, which is authentic. Authentic voices, authentic perspectives, authentic.
Okay, I think it's a great word though. It's really necessary, and I think that's kind of one of the things that we're trying to do here too, is have authentic conversations with people, and really get to that. So that's a great word. It's better than awesome. Awesome makes me sound like I'm 16. Okay, what is your most treasured possession?
I think my books. I have this vision of a day when people won't actually have bookshelves full of books anymore, when we're all reading books on devices. And so I used to give away my books soon after I read them. And now I'm feeling a little stingy about it and wanting to hold on to them because I feel like they're going to become obsolete. And I just take a lot of comfort at looking at whole shelves of books.
I think that's also a family value that's passed on. Like my mother was an English teacher, so books were incredibly valuable to her. And it's just having books in your house is something that displayed, I think, is kind of a symbol of your history, your education, your values, and maybe not everybody has that, but it's in some families. I think that's something that's been really important. Interestingly enough, I'm trying to think when this was, 2012 maybe, I was in Singapore at a school of the future. They have these different kind of, signature schools and different specialties. And this was a science and technology one. And they had blank shelves in their library because they believe the future is going to be digital. And so there was like empty shelves kind of symbolizing what could have been there. It was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think it's also like they're almost like photo albums for me, because I can look at my bookshelf, and while particularly at my age, I can generally not remember the plots of all the books that I've read, but I can remember often when I read them. And then it will remind me of that time, as that was when I was backpacking through Europe. That was when I was on the beach at this place. So it's a sense memory thing too, when I scan the bookshelf.
I love that. Books as photo album. That's great. Okay, last one. This is one that we just talked about a little bit before we started. Who are your heroes in real life? Do you have a hero personally? And then we'll get going with your presentation.
Yeah. I mean, I think it changes all the time, right? But I think right now, for me, my hero is my 15-year-old daughter, who is transgender and is just amazingly resilient and brave and self-aware and deeply confused and sad and all kinds of things. But at the core, just the courage she's showing to be herself is deeply important to me to watch every day.
It must be an amazing journey to watch, and especially again during the pandemic, knowing who you are as a teenager, dealing with the mental health challenges that everybody is dealing with in general, and then on top of that, going through that process and figuring out things. It must be incredibly challenging. 15, I can't imagine.
I know. She knows things about herself that I still don't know. So.
That's great. And I think our teenagers are an interesting barometer of the times, and trying to figure out how the world looks to them right now is pretty amazing and intriguing and scary at the same time. Yeah. And without I should mention this too, thinking about what happened over the weekend in Buffalo. Every time, Courtney, when Steve and I used to get together and do face-to-face events, different places, there was always some sort of event that preceded our event that needed recognition and acknowledgement. And every time I would say the same thing, like global education is needed more than ever. And that bears repeating again, unfortunately. But I think I think we're all wrestling with a very depressing weekend with the mass event in Buffalo, and how do we go forward? How do we prevent this? How do how do we connect with 18-year-olds and educate them properly so that things like this don't happen, and combat the underlying mental health, racism, white supremacy that goes with it. So it's depressing for all of us, I think. But I think it also commits us to the kind of work that we've been doing with young people, with adults, pushing forward for a better world. And so I just want to acknowledge that to everyone who's here and who might be listening, that who are thinking of everyone affected by that tragedy, and our work will be inspired to, I think, going forward to keep on working on these kinds of issues that will help others. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to you, and I would love to hear how things are going for Global Nomad in light of the pandemic, Global Nomads, and your work with youth. I think is really exciting. We talked about this a couple months ago about how you've been involving students in the design of learning experiences. So I'm excited to learn from you today, Courtney, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the perfect segue into what I was hoping to share with you guys today. We are really looking at ways to accelerate the process of having young people in the driver's seat. And I think it does speak to this question of how do we help young people make meaning of what's happening in the world today, and really prepared to sit in the leadership seat. And so what I wanted to share with you today is sort of is still a bit of a work in progress with us in our learning process around having young people design. And I want to give you a little bit of background on how we got there. I want to tell you a little bit about how it happens that they do this work, what the process is, and then show you some of the products that they've developed, and then just would love to open it up for conversation. So let me share my screen here. And I'm going to share just a bit of some slides to give some context. I'm going to flip through some slides that I don't think we need to go too deeply in today, just in the interest of being able to save time for conversation. So I want to start though by just sharing a little story with you. I just mentioned my 15-year-old teen, and I had a conversation with her this weekend that was so connected to what I want to talk to you about today. I was in our living room watching the news, and not surprisingly, there was a piece on about the Russia-Ukrainian war, and with a specific focus on the rising gas prices in the U.S. As related to that war. And my daughter walked through and said, and paused for just a second, which is unusual, and turned to me and said, "Yeah, I don't get this. I heard that we only get about 5% of our oil from Russia. So the fact that our gas prices are going up is totally sus." And so for those of you who work with teens, that means suspicious. Totally sus, mama. This is sus. And so I was so excited that she was even commenting on the news. And so I sort of go all in and say, that's so interesting that you say that, because I also didn't know that much about Russia and Ukraine and their history, and didn't understand the whole issue around oil and gas prices. And so I've done a ton of research on it. And before I could get another word out, she looked at me with the biggest eye roll ever and said, "Oh my God, Mom, please don't give me the textbook version. Just give me the TikTok version." I have to say that my reaction was probably not my proudest parenting moment, and I won't go into that. But I think what was challenging for me in that moment is that it felt really important to me that she understand the history and the politics and the economic situation that was involved with the Russian-Ukrainian war, and the social justice issues and the humanitarian issues. And I just didn't think that she had that background, and it was important to me that she have it. At the same time, I was deeply empathetic to her desire to have this sort of snappy, TikTok version, engaging version of TikTok. That version of it she wanted. And I got that because, for her, someone like her who lives in social media, she has information coming at her 24/7, and it's just too much to process. And she wanted the quick and easy version. And so, I think we hear this all the time from the young people we work with. They're they're super cranky about, how school information comes at them, but they're also really distrustful of social media, interestingly. So I wanted to just share, I have a quick video. We just took some snippets. This is really raw. It's just snippets from some of our youth talking to our board members. So it's, I just thought it would be helpful, informative to hear some of their perspectives.
Things that you learn about are textbook focused. The content that you're learning in school is straight from a textbook, and then obviously it's like taken into a way to teach it to scholars, to different scholars everywhere. But majority of us are learning like technically the same thing from a textbook.
In whatever country you're in, your school curriculum is going to be biased no matter what.
I don't even remember. I don't know if I can say when last the textbooks were updated. I don't know if it's like 2014 or 2016.
A lot of the algorithms and that are behind like all these social media platforms, they show you the content based off content that you already like.
And I think I'm particularly worried about social media right now and how there's a lot of performativity going on.
The purpose of social media is to cater to you. And with all different platforms. So when it's catered to you, you don't get all the diverse perspectives of so many people around the world.
So that's just a few of the voices that are our young people, and I think we hear the same thing from educators. They want the deep engagement that they see young people having with social media, but like me, they want young people also to have the foundational knowledge that they need to learn and thrive both inside the classroom and outside. So while there's these, what I think are widening intergenerational gaps between young people and adults in terms of how we move through the world, communicate, build relationships, learn, I think something that both of generations agree on is that neither of these are hitting the mark, neither social media nor textbooks. And so we need a new option, but, I think it would be wrong to say that we're starting from a blank sheet of paper, because I think both of these offer something that we want to hold on to. So when we consider at Global Nomads, when we look at social media, we want to hold on to the fact that there's youth authorship and authentic perspectives, we want things to be current and engaging and fresh and dynamic and true primary resources, and even the visual appeal of social media. And for textbooks, we really appreciate and want to maintain the rigor, the thoughtful scope and sequence, the research base, and the fact that it's developed for learning purposes. And so those things we want to hold on to. And, for social media, we want to leave behind the toxicity, the echo chambers, the misinformation. And for textbooks, they're basically stale and outdated before they even get published. So we need them to be more current, and we need to get rid of this reliance on adult authorship. We need, more primary sources that are true primary sources, not those through other people's lens. And, I think now, more than ever, we're seeing across the United States, at least, that in full relief, that we know that the textbook content is brokered through political and economic interests. So those are the things we want to leave behind. And, at Global Nomads, we've been grappling with this for some years, trying to figure this out. But during the pandemic and all the racial reckoning that we've been through, really caused us to question all of the ways that we've been doing things and disrupted all of our typical processes and systems. And so we questioned our existing approach to content development and curriculum development, which had the adults as the designers and young people only giving us feedback after they had completely gone through the program. And at the same time that we were questioning all this, we had a bunch of young people coming to us saying that they wanted greater connection with their global peers. They really wanted to dig into issues of social justice, and they wanted greater agency over those conversations. And so that led us to develop what we call the Youth Content Creation Lab. And this is our response that we think leverages youth passions for creating content, preserves the rigor of textbooks, and provides the dynamic engagement of social media. And we did that by upending our former model and making the young people the designers of our learning content. And so we've done several rounds of this now and got some, what we think is some pretty amazing content with youth and educators alike are telling us is really resonating with them. And so that's what I want to sort of share a little bit with you about how this actually happens. And I'm going to do that by describing what's happening in our current spring cohort. So these are the young people who are in our Content Creation Lab cohort right now. We selected these 36 from over 100 applicants to be in the pool. They range in age from 11 to 21. They come from 19 different countries. And we divide them into teams, and we really intentionally design these teams with as much diversity in terms of the youth identities and lived experiences as possible, because the intention here is that the young people are designing curricula that represent multiple perspectives so that it resonates with a large variety of young people around the world. We let the young people choose the topic that they want to design around. The only parameter is that it has to align to a sustainable development goal. So this Content Creation Lab cohort chose careers. And you see the careers listed along the bottom of their pictures. But importantly, they're not doing the sort of typical, how do you become an architect and what are the different kinds of roles you can have in architecture. Instead, what they wanted to explore and design curriculum around is how can professionals in these fields contribute to a more just and sustainable world. So how can you have social impact within finance, within architecture, within medicine? And they're coming up with some really interesting and provocative ideas here. And so let's dig into the architecture team. So this is our team. They represent young people from the US, from Canada, South Africa, Jordan, Nigeria, India, and Mexico, and range from 11 to 18. What we do when they start with us is we focus very heavily on providing them upfront training. And so we provide the team leaders, the two women in the top left-hand corner are our team leaders. We provide the team leaders with a lot of leadership development, and we provide all of them with training in video production and writing and sustainable development goals and social media marketing. But our most intense training is around Wiggins backward design. And so this, for educators, obviously is a second nature to you. Teach them how to develop the big ideas, essential questions, their learning outcomes, their assignments, and then ultimately the learning activities. And so what I thought I'd do is share a little bit about the work that's coming out of this structured process for them. And, I think it's important to mention that our work is really about providing them with the foundational training and sort of being their supports along the way. But in process, what we do once we provide that training is really step out of the way and let them do the work on their own within their team. So what you're about to see is work that they've generated in their team meetings through the leadership of their team leaders without staff intervention. So again, this is the architecture team. They're looking at issues of sustainable or social impact within architecture. So these are just a couple of examples of the big ideas they've come up with. Architectural infrastructure is a statement of our values and history when we look at what is built where, the quality of those buildings, the way people interact with them or do not. We can get a sense of our personal and community values. And then you see parenthetically which SDGs they align to. And then just quickly, the second one, in order to make architectural infrastructure more just and sustainable, a diversity of perspectives needs to be included at every stage of planning, design, critical thinking, construction, and use. We need to increase representation in the field by race, socioeconomic class, region, gender, and disability in order to achieve just and sustainable physical communities. And we need all people to receive equal pay for equal work. So these are just a couple of their very big ideas. And as I read these, really all I can think about is this is not the kind of thing I was thinking about at age 12, but they are. And so I think it's really important that we allow them these opportunities to sort of grapple with all of the big concepts that are present for them. So then from this, they come up with their essential questions. So these are a couple of the sample questions that they've come up with. How does sustainable architecture help with human rights? These are some of the learning outcomes. That you should understand the key factors of designing a community and infrastructure that is accessible and beneficial to the environment. And then here's a sample assignment. Describe a place where you feel like you belong. How is your sense of belonging connected to architecture? What makes you feel like you belong? Compare this place to somewhere where you feel you do not belong. What makes you feel like you don't belong? So that's an assignment, and then they create curricular content around these things and activities and learning experiences for young people. So I want to share with you just a little piece of a video that they've started to create that goes along with that assignment. It's still quite rough. It needs captioning. But I do think it's worth sharing and is a pretty powerful example of how they develop content that goes along with this. So let me just quickly share this video with you.
Hi, I'm Azaria. I'm a 19-year-old African-American young woman. I am wearing glasses. I have 2-strand twists in my hair, and I have gold hoop earrings. As a college student studying architecture, I focus my energy on thinking of ways to create buildings that have a sense of belonging. But does all architecture achieve this? Of course not. For example, I do not feel welcome in areas that resemble colonial America or have any similarity to plantations, anything that reminds me of the terrible time of slavery in the United States. However, I do feel very welcome at my college campus, which is a historically Black college university. We have lots of buildings that hold great significance to African-American history and culture. And I feel very connected to my ancestors and the rest of people that look like me when I am on this campus. Now, let's see what people around the world in different countries have to say about architecture and belonging. First, we're going to take a look at my colleague, Joshua, who is having a conversation with this friend.
Can you tell me a place which gives you a feeling of belonging?
My village gives me a sense of belonging.
And why does it make you feel like so?
Although my village is interior, there are abundance of nature. Example, the trees, the hills, and the streams. All this makes me so happy.
That's really interesting. It actually makes me think about how architecture fits into the natural environment. How can we create architectural structures that preserve the aspects of our natural surroundings that make us feel like we belong? Now let's take a look at Efsa from Turkey and Roar from Jordan.
So I wanted to ask you about a place which gives you a feeling of belonging. Like it could be a shopping mall, it could be a cafe. Could you explain to me why it makes you feel like so?
I would think of one place actually. It would be downtown, my city. Like there is a lot of, I'm gonna say historical buildings, historical architecture, and there is also like 5 minutes away from this place, a homeless city. Like the boulevard is right next to downtown. I feel belong to this place because like in the middle of all of the change, it stays the same. Like the whole scent of the old city and old people is just the same. So it's kind of feel good to see all like how people are doing and how the space is still going on, even though the whole place is evolving.
Okay, so that they go on with more conversations there, but I think that gives you a sense of some of the work that they're doing to align with their curricula. So let me go back now to where we were here. I want to show you what it looks like. Oh, sorry. This is just an example of all the work they do is done in team meetings led by their team leader, Azaria. They do this mainly on the weekends because it's the only time that their time zones overlap for the most part. And so they do individual work throughout the week, and then they come together back in the weekend to sort of share work, to reflect, to make decisions, and to plan for the next week's work. So really very much youth driven here in the work that they're doing. So that's a work in progress. What I want to show you now is an example of a finished course that was created through our pilot cohort a couple of years ago, Overcoming Bias. It was worked on by these 3 youth. It was a small cohort because it was just our pilot. And all of our curricular content follows this scope and sequence. So we have 4 modules. The first one looks at the issue that we're exploring through an individual lens. The second module looks at it through a local or community lens. The third through a global lens, and lastly through a call to action. And then within each of the modules, we follow the same structure as well. There's a get ready section. which in educator speak is the mini lesson. Then there's a explore section where they get to look at the stories that young people who've already gone through the course have submitted. And then lastly, they're asked to share their own stories. So let me just share with you what it looks like. This is just a screenshot of what the mini lesson get ready section looks like. Lots of visuals, some content around selection bias, lots of reflective questions, multimedia. And this is actually a video that our youth created, and it's more of a teaching an actual concept than the last one was. And so I want to show you this quickly as well.
How do different people react to the same thing based on their biases and beliefs? Watch how Antonella from Ecuador and Ezgi from Turkey go up the ladder of inference as they react to the same dog.
The other day, I was walking down the street when I came across a dog.
The other day, I was walking down the street and I saw a dog. Antonella and Ezgi had the same exact information in front of them when they first saw the dog.
This dog had the most beautiful pattern on its fur and the most caring expression. From afar, it almost looked as if it was smiling.
The dog in front of me had this huge muscles and messed up ears. I swear I could hear him growling from the other side of the street. See how even though they had the same information, they focused on different things? Just by selecting what to focus on, they're showing a form of bias.
What a cutie! I just wanted to run up and rub its belly.
It looked so scary, and I just knew that those ears were bitten off in a fight that he was in, and I could tell he could bite me if I got close. Now Antonella and Ezgi have made assumptions about the dog based on the data they selected. Look how different those assumptions are. And they even started drawing conclusions.
This dog was definitely friendly.
This dog was definitely dangerous. Now they've drawn a broad conclusion about the dog. Conclusions that will affect how they interact with this dog and others like it.
My cousin also has a sweet pit bull. It is always so playful and fun.
I've heard so many stories about people getting attacked by pit bulls, and people train them to be vicious fighters. They are now sharing their beliefs about a whole group of dogs based on their experiences or media influences. Their beliefs shape the data they selected, and they use the same selected data to confirm their beliefs. This is how people get stuck in bias.
I decided to walk up to its owners and ask if I could pet it.
So what I did is I decided to cross the street to avoid the dog. See how that works? Even when two people are exposed to the same exact information, the way they make sense of it can be totally different, and their biases can get in the way of getting more complete information.
So that's an example of some content that the young people have created for the Get Ready section of Overcoming Bias. And then once they get done with that section, they next go to the Explore section. This is the story repository that houses all the stories that young people who have already gone through the course have submitted in response to a story prompt. And for this module, the story prompt is, tell us about a time when you made an assumption about somebody that later proved to be wrong. And each one of these red pins on here represents a story that someone has submitted. So young people are able to explore stories from all over the world and learn about the lived realities of their global peers. And what's really important about this is that this story exchange is really important to our model in general, because it's a way to further center youth voices beyond those who are designing the curriculum. Because in this way, it allows every young person who goes through the program to offer their own primary source about their lives. And for youth who typically don't see themselves written into traditional curricula, in this way, they get to write themselves into ours. And so the curriculum is ever evolving and ever expanding based on the learners who go through it. And then this is, oh, sorry, I don't have a slide for this, but next, the young people, after they read these stories, will get the exact same story prompt. So they'll go to share and they'll be asked the same story prompt. They'll type in their stories, submit it, we review them. And once they've been reviewed, they get put into the story repository. So they're both consuming these stories and they're also contributing to these stories. So, as I said in the beginning, based on the response we're getting from young people, we think we're onto something here from both youth and educators. And so I want to let you hear again from our young people that we heard from in the beginning about their response to this new way of developing content.
With the modules, it's more engaging, and you have the chance to learn about things that are currently happening.
It was just really cool to express like my own thoughts and experiences like with things that are happening in San Antonio, Texas. And also you can click on other people's stories around the world and it'll show you where they are, and just read kind of what they've gone through in a similar life. Also just compare two different communities and see how, even though we're like halfway across the world, there's a lot that we have in common.
GNG brings to light those ideas, those beliefs, and those people that are otherwise not shown.
What makes it different from regular school is that the assignments at the end are they're not super structured. It's not like a fill in the blank. It's more just like allowing you to express your thoughts about what you just learned.
I can relate better to other young people, so I can better communicate with them.
It's more relatable and it's more like now.
So we've still a lot of learning to do with this, both, with and from our youth designers and educators who implement our programs. And I think one of the things that we're already really grappling with is, this challenge that youth really want to push the boundaries of what's considered appropriate discourse in schools. And educators and parents are pushing back on that. For instance, some of the issues that young people want to talk about are things like gender-based violence or honor killings, naming racism. And then we're grappling with the CRT issues in the United States. They want to talk about sexuality and gender identity. And, as one of our young people who said to one of our board members who said, what is it that you guys want to talk about next? And her answer was basically everything adults don't want us to. And so we're going to have to figure out how we honor young people as designers while acknowledging the gatekeeper function that educators and parents play in determining whether our programs get implemented in schools. And that's, a real tension that we're struggling with right now. And so I want to pause there, and just so that we can sort of open it up for conversation and thoughts either on that challenge that we're working with right now, or others that you think come up when you think about young people as curriculum designers.
So many questions I have, and we have Christine here from Japan who may want to jump in too and ask some questions as well. So first of all, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, where do you find your students? Do they find you? This seems like a departure too from what Global Nomads has done traditionally, which has been virtual exchange kind of work. So how have you found kids, in other parts of the world and that sort of thing? And let's start there.
Yeah, so I want to answer the second part first,
Yeah.
Which is, for us, we feel like it is still very much grounded in virtual exchange. So the idea that young people are learning together about each other and about the world is what we consider to be the core of virtual exchange. what was, I think what some might have sort of in their mind, the image they might have is the face-to-face dialogue. And what we know from our experience with classrooms all over the world and came into full relief during COVID is that disruptions are constantly happening around the world that make that face-to-face connection a challenge and often vulnerable to disruptions. And so we've designed experiences that still allow young people to share personally about themselves and their lives and their communities and cultures, but doesn't rely on technology happening, working perfectly, or the unexpected fire drill to disrupt the conversation, or all the other things we know going on in the world. And so it's mainly asynchronous, though these courses are complemented by 3 to 5 live events each year that you can participate in. But we wanted to remove the vulnerability of needing to be able to connect face to face or not at all.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's just more, it's structured differently is essentially how it is. Okay. That's great.
But still change. And then to your question about how we're finding young people. So we haven't cracked the code on this yet, right? We're still, we've focused so much on the process of the work that we haven't done as much work as we need to do on the recruitment. And so this past cohort that we have with 19 different countries, we really just did outreach to all the schools and partners that we work with around the world and asked them to get the word out. We need to do more work on that to make sure that we're getting the true diversity, regional diversity and identity diversity that we're looking for. So continuing to push on that front.
So one way you probably are doing that, I've noticed this week and last week, is that you're participating in the Youth Made Festival through Digital Promise, and you're doing a bunch of activities with that. Can you tell us a little bit about those activities? And I'll put the link in for Christine.
Yeah, so it actually has our Content Creation Lab members doing Instagram takeovers. So they're sharing stories about, I'm going to use words as if I really know how to use Instagram. They're sharing their story about their experience in the Content Creation Lab. And each day it's a different Content Creation Lab member who's taking over our Instagram.
Oh, cool. The other thing that occurred to me too, that some of the students that you showed might be good candidates for, I think I might have mentioned this before, 100.org has a student ambassador program. And they have before the pandemic, they have a summit in Helsinki every winter. And the idea is that they showcase like 100 global innovations that people have submitted. Plus they have these student ambassadors who are kind of leading the charge. And I found them to be really intriguing. The one year I went in 2018. And they remind me of the students that you were showcasing just now. So that might be good for you. Christine, do you want to ask a question and talk a little bit about your work too? We'd love to hear.
So thank you so much. Courtney, I was really very excited when I saw the news from Lucy about that you were presenting today, because I was really interested after I checked out your program. I'm doing a similar type of program here in Japan, but it's more program based. It's not to the level that you're doing. But I have a lot of takeaways from just from listening to your presentation. So thank you for that. I have 2 questions. One is a practical question about you were talking about your spring cohort. How many weeks or how many months do the cohorts run?
Yeah, so they typically run on a semester basis, although this group has not completely finished their curriculum they've been working on. So some of them are going to continue to work into the summer. And I should say we pay them all a stipend. That is really important to us, that we are able to allow young people who need to be earning money in their out of school hours, that they're also able to participate.
That's interesting. That's a really, because I think a lot of educational programs, or even having kids design, being project-based learning or designing their own curriculums, I think a lot of educators or program coordinators just assume that, well, you should be grateful to be here, and we're giving you this opportunity, so do all the work and thanks. So I think that's a really great idea to pay a stipend to the kids who are involved in this. My other question was, how do you manage or handle language issues? Is it mostly in English? Is it mostly students who are in like international schools, or I'm kind of just curious about how you handle that through in your programs.
Right now the Content Creation Lab runs in English, though there are widely varying degrees of English language fluency. Having said that, our content is offered in a number of ways. And so we have versions of the written courses that I showed you that are offered in accessible versions. And so we have video-based versions that have American Sign Language interpreters and captioning and image descriptions so that different types of learners or youth with disabilities can access the same content. And then starting in the fall, we're going to be offering our courses in multiple languages, both for young people who don't speak English fluently enough to access the course, but also for world language learners in other parts of the world. So we've already launched an Arabic version. We'll be launching a Spanish version in the fall, and that Spanish version will be piloted with Spanish language learners in the US and English language learners in Mexico City. So we're working to develop all of our content in multiple languages.
I just love all these ideas. It's amazing. And I can see that you are at a point where it's not just a discussion or it's not just an idea, but you're actually putting it into action. And I think that's such an important part. You know, it's great to have the idea and great to have the passion to do it, but getting to the point where you can actually get out and get it done is a totally different level. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
I feel very motivated hearing you, listening to your story and your conversation. So thank you.
Well, and I have to say, it hasn't always been, like I don't want to give us too much credit. I remember 2 years ago when our chief of programs was talking about us developing the accessible versions with the sign language interpreters and the image descriptions and so forth. And it was, right after COVID had started, our budget was tight, fundraising was uncertain. We were struggling to figure out how many people would actually be able to participate in classrooms. And so my response was, I'm not sure this is the right time. Let's really work to get reach around our existing courses, and then we'll circle back to the accessible versions. And she looked at me and said, "This is a values issue. We can't keep putting it on the back burner. It'll never be the right time." And she was right. And so we sort of steeled ourselves and figured it out even without the money, and we're able to offer it as we should have been doing for a long time.
I imagine that it's been a heavy lift in general, just getting all the moving parts together to put this together. So it's not, I would think it would be hard to do this, but it sounds like you're very structured and have a process down that works. And you said the cornerstone of that was the training for the leaders of the cohorts. How much training? I mean, is it a weekly thing for 6 weeks? Is it asynchronous training? What does that look like?
No, the training is synchronous. And so we start with the team leaders, and they start training, I think, about 3 weeks before the cohort begins. And so they get, deep training on all the things that their teams are going to be trained on, and also on leadership. And so how to give effective feedback, how to make expectations clear, how to manage conflict within teams. And then they get ongoing coaching throughout the process. So if they've got a team member who's not meeting deadlines, they might come to our program director and say, "Let me role play this conversation," or "I'm not comfortable having conflict." And so we coach them through that. And then they join in on all the trainings that the other youth team members get.
And then how are I'm looking at my questions that I wrote in here. Do students get credits for taking the course? And how are schools structuring it too, if they want to incorporate it into what they're already doing?
Yeah, because it's asynchronous, it's so flexible. So we've got, it's generally offered during English language arts or history courses. And it's used as a curricular resource. Sometimes educators are using it as a unit of study. So they might do it over a week or two in a very condensed fashion. And some educators are using it throughout the course of the semester and touching it every week for shorter periods of time. So it really can contract or expand depending on your learning purposes. And now that we're offering it soon in other languages, we hope too that it will get some traction in language learning classes as well, as a way to both learn language and have cultural exchange.
Are they mostly teachers in the U.S. or who's using it out of curiosity?
Yeah, so we're about a little over a third are in the U.S., but the rest are in other parts of the world. So we have an office in Amman, Jordan. So we have a very strong presence in the Middle East, North Africa. So we're in Tunisia, Morocco, and Jordan. We're also in Nigeria and South Africa and Turkey and Armenia and soon to be Mexico. So we're really all over the place.
Okay. Anything else, Christine? Any other burning questions that you have?
Actually, I have a question about, I haven't had a chance to go through the website in detail, but I think there might be a few schools here in Japan that would be interested in what you just said about having the educators use it as a unit of study or for like using it for a semester. And I was wondering, is it possible for teachers here in Japan to access the materials via your website?
Yeah, so our website is about to be reconstructed because it does a very poor job of communicating what we do, but there is a lot about our content there. What is not there is demo access to the actual courses, which I'd be happy to provide you. So if you and I can communicate through email, I can share demo login information with you, and we'd love to have schools there participate. It's a really easy process. It's offered free of charge right now. And so really all it takes is we need to know the students who will be participating. We operate on a Canvas learning management system. So we would give login credentials to Canvas. And then there's some educator resources there for the educators to understand how to implement the course. And then there's the coursework for the students.
Excellent. That would be great, because I do know a few, not university all the way down to elementary schools, a few schools that I think would be very interested in maybe kind of dipping in and out, as you said, sometimes the educators use it as like a very short, for short term or long term. So I would definitely like to share that with the teachers here.
Is there a cost for it, out of curiosity, or is it all accessible?
Right now. It's free right now.
Wow, that's amazing. Sorry to interrupt, Christine.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah, no, I heard it as well. I was like, oh yes, free of charge is always very nice, But yeah, I think it's really. Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
My phone.
Technology.
No, but really, thank you very much. I've been quite inspired by listening to your story. So,
yeah, Christine, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
One of the things we're always trying to understand is, how to articulate the value proposition for educators. And so I'm curious, when you heard us describe what we offer, and you think about going to your colleagues in Japan, what are you going to say to them? Like, why I think you should do this because what?
So I've been in Japan for about 30 years. I'm originally from the States, and English language learning is a huge focus here, but many of the kids here don't speak English to a level that would allow them to have any kind of international discourse to the level that you would actually get something out of it. So for me, this kind of experience, if the students here could actually see that English is like a living, breathing thing, and then if they study more and if they work harder and they have these opportunities to interact with kids in other countries, they can actually see that it benefits them. So for me, that's kind of like a really big selling point. My own program is very similar in terms of giving kids access to people outside of their own communities. So if you go to international school here in Japan, you have those opportunities. But my particular program focuses on the kids in local schools who don't have the level of English to do this. So this is why I'm interested in myself personally in how you address the language issue, in having kids interact with other people around the world. So, so for me, that's a really big selling point, that the access to international, an international, like basically access to a stage where you can actually have real discourse about real issues. That's really the hook for me. And I think that would be something that I'm going to let the teachers know here. They're very, very into the SDGs. Very huge in Japan. So that's also a very big, I think, hook for them as well. So those were the points that I kind of
that's so
got from
helpful.
here.
I think it makes me think a lot. So Lucy's putting authentic in the chat because I overused that word is for me. But I do think language learning, it's so important that young people are engaged in authentic language practice. And so the story exchange is written, is written by their global peers. And I should say right now, Christine, the story exchange, we have Google Translate incorporated into that, so they can read stories in whatever language they want to, and they can write their stories in whatever language they want to. The rest of the content isn't accessible that way yet, but will be in the fall. And I think this authenticity in language learning is so important because, it's a lot like, it is a lot like adolescent literacy, where we have this misalignment between young people's skills for reading and the content that we offer them. And the content is often developmentally inappropriate for them because their skills are so limited. And similarly with English language learning for middle school and high school students, we are either offering them content that's so basic that it's not engaging for them, or is the sort of stereotypical read Don Quixote, which is inaccessible. And so this is learning about real issues, but in a conversational vocabulary, and then engaging in real life conversation through story exchange and through our live events with other teenagers. So you're learning the practical, usable language skills.
And I would think that if you're using Google Meet or Zoom too, that there's some translation, there's captioning and that sort of thing, which I think makes things easier for people if their English is not strong. So I would think that would be helpful. What I love about this is that I think what we're missing in the conversation and all the ugliness here in the US, and you're lucky to be missing it in Japan, Christine, is the respect for student voice and respect for students, that they actually have something to contribute to the conversation. And so I think that that's what's intriguing for me here is how do we, this is a tangible example of including students in doing something that's relevant, timely, authentic, all those words. It also reminds me too, Courtney, last Friday, we had a woman on who's the assistant head of school and an English teacher at Sacred Heart in Greenwich. And she's she's a brilliant curriculum designer. And her name's Linda Vasu, and she might be kind of an interesting person for you to know in general. Like, I think she would be great for coaching teachers on how to make things interesting and relevant for students. But she weaves computational thinking into teaching The Great Gatsby and all these kind of wild things. And she's always at the center of her ethos about curriculum design how is this going to be interesting and relevant to my students? And so she makes, Hamlet come alive with the way that she approaches it and that sort of thing. And, which we all know is pretty dry and inaccessible to most people. So that mindset is so critical for educators in general, whether you're working in a nonprofit setting or directly in a school or whatever. It's like, how can we make this relevant? And I think that's going to be my takeaway from today. How can we make this interesting and relevant and deep for whomever the audience is, whether it's students, whether it's educators? That's got to be front and center, and that's what's missing part of the conversation. I think the anti-CRT type people are not getting. They don't understand the stuff themselves either. To understand that it's not about making people feel bad, and it's about understanding other humans on this planet. So thank you. I really appreciate everything. it's the top of the hour, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. Courtney, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming and being part of this. Yeah, and we're going to have more things coming and more opportunities for you to kind of, you know, showcase what you're doing and that sort of thing. So anything that we can do to help kind of amplify that. And, you know, our audience may be small but mighty, but you'll have this, you know, these valuable, the people who are coming to these things are people who are directly interested in the work of the guest speaker, like Christine. So Christine, thank you for coming as well and engaging. I appreciate it. So any final words, Courtney, before we end?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that I think what's so important too is that I not leave the impression that we are, it's either listening to youth voice or educator voice. You know, I've worked in US education my entire career, and I am deeply aware of the constraints that educators face and the frustrations that they feel. And so it's really about aligning ourselves all on the same side of the table and looking at the issues across the table and figuring out how together we can allow teachers to meet the requirements that they have to meet, while also finding ways as they want to deeply engage the young people in their classrooms. And I think there is a way of doing that meets all of those needs.
Perfect. All right, that's a great way to end. I'm going to stop recording.